Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's Roshan Mohammed Salih here, the editor-in-chief of Five Pillars, and welcome to another edition of The Big Picture, the show, Five Pillars shows that brings you the hot topics from every week for a bit of in-depth discussion and analysis. Today, we've got a cracking show lined up for you once more with cracking guests. We're going to be talking about LGBT in schools. Every Muslim parent should be watching this because ultimately it's your kids' future at stake. We're also going to be talking about COVID. Obviously, it looks like a second wave is coming. We're going to go into probably another lockdown. This is going to affect Muslims financially in a huge way. So I'm delighted to announce that we've got the man himself from Islamic Finance Guru, Ibrahim Khan, who's going to be the Muslim Martin Lewis, I'm sure, one day. That's what he'll be known as. And he's going to be talking about Muslims and how they can navigate the COVID crisis. But first of all, a bit of a new kind of segment at the beginning of the show. We're going to be talking about the most popular stories on the Five Pillars website over the last week. And without doubt, the most popular story was concerning this man, Imam Suleiman, who's a prominent American imam. He issued a clarification statement publicly repenting and apologizing for participating in an un-Islamic ritual during a solidarity march for Mexican immigrants in 2018. The issue was first raised by the American Muslim blogger Daniel Hakikachu in a video released on September the 18th. The ritual, which is commonly known as libation, entails pouring liquid or water on the ground as an offering to a deity or to commemorate the spirits of the deceased. And of course, this caused outrage in some quarters. Imam Suleiman says multi-faith work, protests, activist spaces, etc., are difficult spaces to navigate. This man has also been in the news. The Chelsea's billionaire owner, Roman Abramovich. An investigation by BBC Arabic found that Abramovich controls companies that have donated $100 million to a settler organization operating in occupied East Jerusalem, therefore Palestinian land. Nearly half of the donations that Elad received between 2005 and 2018 came from 4 British Virgin Island companies, and the person behind these companies had remained anonymous until now. Of course, it was Mr. Abramovich. Al Rayyan Bank has been in the news this week, the biggest Islamic bank in Britain. It's informed its charity clients that they can no longer make transactions outside of the European Union, which could potentially cripple their aid work in places such as Syria, Palestine, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and elsewhere. It's believed Al Rayyan Bank's restrictions could devastate many Muslim charities who had their accounts closed elsewhere. And as these charities do the majority of their aid work outside of the EU, it's uncertain how they can continue to appeal for funds for needy people in those regions. And finally, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Ibrahim Khan, he's been in the news as well. He condemned India's Hindu nationalist government and its moves to cement control of Muslim-majority Kashmir, calling India a state sponsor of hatred and prejudice against Islam. Khan said that at the annual UN gathering of world leaders, that Islamophobia rules India and threatens the nearly 200 million Muslims who live there. India responded by calling Khan's remarks lies and a new low in diplomacy. Okay, kids are back at school and Muslim parents need to know about what they're learning. New government guidance has been issued over LGBT teaching, but still there's lots of confusion surrounding it. So we're going to clarify that soon. But let's remind ourselves first of the controversy which erupted in Birmingham last year when Muslim parents had enough of this, what they believed to be LGBT doctrination of their kids, and they launched protests outside Birmingham schools.
But we need to make one thing very clear. This program is not just about telling people that other families and other types of lifestyles exist. It's actually aggressively promoting them, giving it a positive spin and telling people that it is okay for you to be Muslim and for you to be gay. Mr. Moffat Shame, 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 shame. Okay. Mr. Moffat, I did not want to make this personal, but Mr. Moffat has decided upon his own self to reinterpret our religious scriptures. And I don't know where he gets his religious education from and when he became Mufti Moffat. But our religious beliefs are not here to be changed. We don't send our children to school to be indoctrinated. That's the word that these parents have been saying again and again and again. This is an aggressive indoctrination that is going on that we are speaking against. If there was no aggressive promotion, then you would not have had all these parents come out on the street. And as I've said to you, this program is very toxic. Not only do we are aiming to have it abolished in this school, but we're going to have it abolished in every school in Birmingham, every school in the country. And that's going to happen with a grassroots movement of parents coming out on the streets. That is what is needed. Parents coming out and fighting their corner and fighting for their children's rights.
Okay, I'm delighted to be joined by Yusuf Patel from SRE Islamic. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, brother. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you doing, brother?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi. Jazakallah khair for inviting me on today.
Yusuf, you're going to navigate us through this because I think there's a lot of confusion from Muslim parents as to exactly what their rights are, what's being taught in schools. So let's just crack on, get straight into it. What are Muslim children going to be learning? Let's take primary schools first. Are they going to be taught sex education? Are they going to be basically have LGBT indoctrination shoved down their throats?
So I think there's a couple of things here is that it's not, you cannot definitively say this is what every school is going to teach within the country. There are some set guidelines. What's very important for parents to recognize is that sex education in schools will not be a statutory subject and is not a statutory subject from this month. So if a school decides to teach, if a primary school decides to teach sex education classes, parents have got the full right of withdrawal as they did before this month. But the issue of LGBT teaching, that's a bit of a contentious issue because the government in its guidance has been very unclear for many months. It's been sending very mixed signals, trying to satisfy all of the groups, whether it be the LGBT lobby or whether it be other parents groups who are concerned about what the plans are. And therefore, it's tried to sit on the fence on a number of issues. Just this week, though, the government did clarify something that is in the guidance, but hasn't really been interpreted correctly by schools, in that primary schools are recommended to teach about LGBT families, but that there is no requirement to do so. That a primary school can decide not to teach about LGBT families, but in a secondary school it has to be taught. So a lot of the issues will be ironed out in implementation, which is a really worrying thing for a lot of parents. But I think the key issue is that parents have got to engage with their children's school, because schools will implement whatever they can. But if there's no voices at the other end saying we don't want this taught to our children, or there's no requirement for you to teach that in this way and involve us in the consultation process, because that is a legal requirement, then schools will just get away with what they can get away with.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, brother, in primary schools, it's not compulsory to teach this sex education, and Muslim parents can withdraw their children, but that's not the case in secondary schools. They have no right of withdrawal.
So in primary school, there's going to be a new subject called relationship education. So that's the new subject. Now, that's not meant to have any aspect of sex education within it. There's supposed to be a clear demarcation line between the two subject areas, one being statutory, which is relationship education, and the other being non-statutory, which is sex education. But the problem is that it's all about implementation. I think the key thing is that parents engage with their children's school, and that will that will show schools that parents are concerned about that, and that they need to be careful about what they implement and whether they overteach over and above the curriculum requirements. Now, in secondary schools, their relationship and sex education is going to become a statutory subject, or is a statutory subject from this month. Now, you're not able to withdraw from the relationship education element of this subject, but you can make a request to withdraw from the sex education element of this subject. So even in secondary schools, you can. Now, the government has said in the majority of cases, parents will be allowed to withdraw, but time will tell whether parents, on what basis parents are disallowed from withdrawing their children in a secondary school setting. But as in primary school, the amount of there's a clear correlation between parental engagement and what a school decides to teach. So really, it's about us ensuring that schools fulfill their requirements, they engage us parents, and we give our views especially about the resources that schools use. That's a key area of concern.
How's this going to affect Muslim schools, brother?
So Muslim schools have to teach both subjects, relationship education and relationship sex education, whether they're Muslim primary school or a secondary school. There's more latitude in terms of how they teach it, because the government has said, look, you can teach within the remit of your faith. But the problem is that one of the key areas is Ofsted. Ofsted has always tried to inspect over and above the curriculum requirements. So I remember speaking to a Muslim school a number of years ago, which had only a simple statement in its policy, which said that any sexual relations outside of marriage is a sin, including same-sex relationships. Now, Ofsted had a problem, the faith school having that in a policy, because they said that if there's a child in that school which is from that background, then you are sidelining that child. Now, if a faith school is not allowed to present that, that's a significant problem. So Ofsted is always the problem with regards to when Muslim schools decide to follow the guidance and just fulfill the requirements. Ofsted always requires more. But I think
they have a bit of an ideologue as head, don't they? Amanda Spielman, who's been accused of Islamophobia.
In recent years, they had plenty of people who are very ideologically driven to do their jobs.
Do schools have autonomy in what they teach? Is there a lot of I know that some head teachers around the country, perhaps in Birmingham, they're like on an ideological crusade to convert Muslims into being pro-LGBT. Others probably don't feel that way. Will one school differ from another?
Yeah, actually, in Birmingham, I think one thing we need to just make clear is that this was before statutory RSE and RE in primary and secondary schools, and this was 2 schools within Birmingham, which has hundreds of schools. The issue is that these were 2 schools which had teachers who were very ideologically driven to implement these things in a particular way, and then they said that this is what is required by law. And if that was required by law, then that means all the other schools in Birmingham and across the country who were not teaching it in that way were falling foul of the law. And I actually think that it was them who were teaching over and above what they should have been teaching. But I think there is going to be differences from school to school, and that's the government has given a lot of freedom to schools. First of all, we need to recognize we're not happy with this new regime. We're not happy with the government taking away more and more rights from parents and giving that to schools. That's not really what the remit of schools are. But even within this area, schools have got flexibility in relation to the materials they use in these lessons and when they teach these lessons. So
Yusuf, I understand now. You basically recommend that parents fight for their rights and make sure the schools consults them, make their views known. You're also, I think, launching a court case, a judicial review over the right to withdraw children from these lessons. Is that correct? Can you tell me about that?
Well, there's a court case that's been launched by a multi-faith coalition involving Muslim parents, Christian parents, Catholic parents, and Jewish parents. And it's a judicial review that will really question whether the government had the legal right to take away the parental right to withdraw, amongst other things, and the fact that the guidance is so unclear. And so that's the basis of that. And I think we're gonna bring more details about that within the next couple of weeks. and we're going to try and create an initiative within the Muslim community to support this, because I think there are different approaches we need to take around these subjects. One is, okay, equipping parents to try and just protect the values of their children in schools. Secondly is trying to look at avenues, legal and otherwise, to counteract some of these new challenges. And then thirdly, it's about parents taking responsibility to recognize that we live in a secular liberal society where lots of values that we taught to our children, not just within schools, but also on TV and social media and mass media, will contradict the values we want to deliver to our children. So we've got to take responsibility for the development and spiritual development and moral development of our children. So they're the three approaches that we are looking at over the next few months.
So Yusuf, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Practical case: a Muslim parent finds out her child is not learning something that is in accordance with Islam. What should he or she do?
Firstly, what we say, if, for example, firstly, we've got to really, a lot of the issues in Birmingham, for example, shouldn't have happened. Schools should not have been telling children that, Abdullah, it's completely okay for you to be Muslim and gay. Or Zainab, you could potentially change from being a girl to a boy, just like you want to change your hair color, you can change your gender. Schools should not be involved in imposing ideological positions to children. That's not their role. Their role is educating children and not indoctrinating them. So I think, first of all, that needs to be challenged with the school. The process of the policy, the complaints procedure of the school needs to be followed. But secondly, what's really important is that we tell, if children are growing up and they're hearing all these messages from schools, from the mass media, to say, look, you can love whoever you love. Love is love, yeah? And there's no difference between a man loving a man and a woman and a man in a marriage loving each other. They're all the same. All that, if you change your gender, you're just as much as a woman as if you were born a woman. We've got to, with our children, really clarify our position with our children, because in a vacuum, our children will just adopt the prevailing societal narratives about this topic.
That's what I was going to ask you next, actually, Yusuf. What is the role of Muslim parents? Because obviously this stuff is going on in society, it's going on in the schools, and to a certain extent, we're a minority in a non-Muslim country. So there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah. So what is our roles as Muslim parents to educate our children at home?
I think first of all, it's that one point you just mentioned just there, which is really key to all of this. We've got to acknowledge that it's our role to raise and educate our own children. Yeah. And nobody is necessarily going to do that for us. There's many people around us within our society, within our communities, that can support us in that role. There's extended family, who can reinforce values and concepts through their role modeling and through their interaction with our children. There's also the madrasa or the maktab that we send our children to, who can support us in the nurturing of our children with regards to Quran. But fundamentally, the role we play with our children in the home is the most important role. And I think we've got to recognize that is going to be the key way in which we pass on our values to our children. And passing our values to our children could be about the way we prioritize things in our lives. Yeah. Are we parents who embrace consumerism? Yeah. If we embrace consumerism, our children will just be consumers. If we do not place any priority upon the importance of the Quran, then our children will not care about the Quran. If we do not pay attention to cementing a strong relationship between us, between the husband and wife, father and mother in the household, and role modeling what that relationship looks like, then our children are going to grow up thinking marriage is not for me. So I think fundamentally from the outset, the way we prioritize our values and pass those on to our children sends a hugely clear message to our children about what is important and what's not so important. And then there's other people around us who can support us in that, but fundamentally that's our role. And as you said, we live in a secular liberal society. We're trying to almost push back against a gaping door. And in going forward, our homes really, it is probably going to be the most important place where we can really raise our children according to our values. But if our children are growing up and they have no concept of our values, then they'll just adopt societal positions around a whole host of different issues.
Yusuf, I mean, those parents who protested outside those Birmingham schools last year, their names were dragged through the mud, in terms of the national media. Politicians were on their back. A lot of Muslim parents will not want to go through this. They're going to be intimidated by it. What do you say to them?
I think, it goes back to the original point that most schools are not like that. Most head teachers want a very good relationship with their parents. Yeah, they don't want to engage in a literal boxing match with their parents to create havoc in the school. Yeah, so the bottom line is really that we're telling schools, and in the guidance documents we produce for schools, we're saying that, look, if you do this right, engage the parents and involve them in decision making around how these subjects are going to be taught, you can avert the potential for conflict in the schools. But if you don't listen to parents, those ingredients that led to the conflict in Birmingham will inevitably lead to conflict in your school. So just don't go down that road. So we need to be very clear to schools that we don't want conflict, we don't want protests outside schools, but really most of the balls are in the schools' court. Yeah, how they discuss this subject and how they engage with parents is mainly the power dynamic is with schools more than parents. So they need to be leaders in this area. But I think on the other issue, it can be very lonely. I've worked with parents, for example, in different boroughs who've been that lone voice in a school. Yeah, that's been saying, look, we don't want this between our children, and all the other Muslim parents abandon that one parent, and the parent just feels lonely, feels isolated, feels intimidated, and feels victimized by the school because they're on their own. So I think what we got to do is that if we are parents who believe in these values and want to ensure that our children are not taught these very strange values in schools, then we've got to commit to supporting those parents who are taking a stand on behalf of all parents.
Yeah, and so back each other up, and also perhaps make alliances with Jewish parents, Christian parents, even secular parents that may not approve of this.
Yeah, absolutely. The wider your alliances, the better. But recognizing as well that a lot of the times there's other that there'll only be the Muslim parents in a school who may actually feel as strongly about this issue, so strongly about this issue that they're willing to do anything about it. But you just think about it. Look, you are doing a huge job, not just for your children, because actually you could potentially take your children out from school, homeschool them, or do all sorts of things for your children. But actually, you've taken on responsibility on behalf of all children. And think about the immense reward you are getting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for engaging in this action to safeguard the innocence of all children. All children are innocent. In primary school, they're all innocent, and they don't deserve to be taught these subjects in a way which goes against
Is homeschooling a option that you would recommend?
So I would say that whether you choose the homeschooling option or you send your children to a Muslim school or a state school, as you need to be involved and a part of your children's lives to know where the influences are in their lives, how they're being affected by those, and what you can do to counteract those. But I would say, if you are able to homeschool, homeschooling has always been portrayed as a very difficult option where you need to have a PhD in a particular subject in order to teach that. That's not the case. Our youngest children are homeschooled in our home, as well as my oldest son. His secondary school age is homeschooled as well, and actually a lot of the time the response, the work, a lot of that work is on my wife, because I'm working throughout the day. But the issue is that whatever you choose for you and your family, given your circumstances, really think about the responsibility of raising our children is with us. Sometimes I go and speak to parents and they say, how can you do this for my children? And actually, I can support parents in different things, and we're going to support parents in a lot of different areas. But fundamentally, you have the greatest impact upon your children's lives. You are with them for longer than anybody else, for a sustained period, from the moment they are born till the moment they leave your home and get married.
I see one of your kids now in the background.
Yes.
I can see your daughter there in the back. Yusuf, I've got one last question. This is like that BBC interview, isn't it? When the kids come crashing through the door.
Let me push her away.
No, she's welcome to stay.
I'm joking. I'm trying to say the BBC interview.
Mashallah. Yusuf, my final question to you, obviously, even myself, I have this kind of maybe prejudice, stereotype in my head that the Department for Education is on an ideological crusade, so are schools. But listening to you, it seems like the picture is much more complicated than that. And not every head teacher wants to shove this down Muslim kids' throats, etc., etc. So there is hope, right?
Yeah, I think in terms of, sometimes, unfortunately, we create a situation where we, I've seen, every single day I get a message from somebody or another to say, I've received this WhatsApp message. Is it true? And 9 times out of 10, I have to say, no, it's not true. Just first of all, just even labeling this whole issue LGBT lessons is inaccurate. Yeah. Or just saying, for example, that they're going to teach sex education in primary schools is completely inaccurate. And actually what that does, it feeds into a narrative of hopelessness amongst parents who feel they can do nothing about it. And actually there's always things you can do. But I think the problem is that the Department of Education, the government in general, is trying to have its cake and eat it. Is trying to pacify and be good with the different lobby groups as well as with parents. Okay. And by doing that, you can't really please any one group, and you end up with contradictory guidance on the same subjects. But really, whatever you do, parents, just really get involved in your schools, engage your head teachers in your schools, and take actions for all children, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Yusuf Patel, for joining us at Spinning Education. Thank you very much.
Barakallah feek.
Okay, let's take some of your comments now on this issue. Loads of comments coming in, mashallah. Really happy that you are engaging with the content here. Ahmed Makda says, bro, tell them this is not required by law and you teachers are pushing your own agenda. It's as simple as that. Happy to help, inshallah. Ahmed Makda, I know Ahmed, he's a brother in, activist brother up in Birmingham. Sorry, Blackburn. Jahangir Akbar says, set up a parent association, become a parent governor, look into homeschooling, look into Islamic schools, set up parent clubs, set up activities and clubs to counter this evil narrative, develop your parenting skills, establish a good relationship with your children, talk to your school, finally turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Excellent advice there from Jahangir. Floating Man says, we need to be realistic. Most parents are not educated enough, nor have time to homeschool their kids. That might be true, but also, I mean, at primary level, what kind of level of education do you really need? And it will be an option for many parents as well who have the time to do that. Aljaz Chowdhury says, when it comes to one's children, you only get what you actually invest in them in the first place. Abu Rahma says, the worst scenario is what I'm having to face. The head of RSE in my daughter's primary school is a lesbian. So teachers who are part of the LGBT community will ultimately push their own beliefs and play a bigger part in trying to push the child's mind towards their own beliefs. Shireen says, children at 5 can't always write their name or count to 10. Why would you try teaching them about sexualization at this age? Why are drag queens reading them stories about having 2 dads? Not necessary. I've got loads of comments here, mashallah. I'm not going to be able to get through all of them because we've got to move on to the next topic. But let's read out a few more, and perhaps at the end of the show, I can read out more. Fatima says, it's frustrating. Parents don't even ask their children what they did in school or attend meetings or any involvement in school. They just drop the kids off like it's a childcare place. And Aljaz says, masjids need to use the community's money in their accounts to double as schools and a community hub, also feeding the poor. Ahmed again says, if anyone is interested in a counter curriculum on RSE sexualization of children for our out of school or even home settings, then some of my friends are providing free community service. And Ahmed has left a link there. Shall I read out one more comment from somebody who hasn't already commented? Because I see that the same people are commenting several times. Hamid Khan says, Alhamdulillah, 5 pillars always representing in the best. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all who are involved. Let's get behind this repeated representation by supporting them with much needed funds, inshallah. And finally, the Muslim Voice says, is it possible 5 pillars could leave this video uploaded so I can send to my family and friends to watch it in their own time? Yeah, it'll stay on our Facebook page and it will also stay on our YouTube page. YouTube, for some reason, they take off the live stream and it takes like about 8 hours after the show's finished for it to be uploaded onto YouTube. Again, I don't know why. So you will see this on YouTube tomorrow, inshallah. Okay, guys, let's move on to another topic. our second topic of the day. We're going to get a cracking guest on very soon, Ibrahim Khan, who is from Islamic Finance Guru. Look, we're heading into another financial meltdown. It's pretty obvious to me. Second wave of COVID, the furlough scheme is ending. All the economic analysts basically predict doom and gloom and economic disaster. And obviously, a lot of Muslims are going to be affected, those that are working in the public sector and private sector. And Muslims do a lot of public-facing jobs, let's face it, in the restaurant trade, for example. And those may well, a lot of those jobs will inevitably have to go. So how are we going to navigate this disaster that is looming? Britons are also, quite frankly, when I see, they're not really following the social distancing rules like they should do. And even on the weekend, there was a massive rally in central London, an anti-COVID rally. And huge scuffles took place between, anti-vaxxers, people who I can only describe really as conspiracy theorists who don't believe that COVID is a thing, that it's part of a government conspiracy to take away our freedoms. Let's have a look at what happened in Trafalgar Square just a few days ago. So significant kind of, bit of argy-bargy there in Trafalgar Square on Saturday between anti-lockdown protesters and the police. Obviously, they're still a minority, but I do get the sense personally that people aren't really following social distancing rules like they have done in the past. But enough from me. I've got a special guest joining me online, Ibrahim Khan, who's joining me from East London, I believe. Ibrahim, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you doing, brother?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for having me on, Roshan. It's an absolute pleasure. And yeah, representing East London. The weather's quite nice. No one's having any argy-bargy as far as I can see. But
everyone's in lockdown and strictly observing those social distancing rules.
Absolutely.
Ibrahim, I think you're going to become a very familiar face. That's my prediction. In the years to come, in the British Muslim scene, you already are a familiar face to many people. But tell me about your business, your organization, Islamic Finance Guru, which I follow very closely, and I'm learning loads from it. I'm somebody who, like most people in this country, I guess, we're all interested in money, but we don't really know how to make it, what to do with it, how to save it, etc. But you're going to teach us all about that in the years to come. What is Islamic Finance Guru? What is your mission?
Yeah, definitely. So, Roshan, as you know, both Mohsin and I, my co-founder, we're both former corporate lawyers. We packed it all in a few months ago and went full-time on Islamic Finance Guru. And for us, the reason why we made that jump was really, it comes down to the mission. And that's, a quarter of the world's population is Muslim, and yet they're at least 20% poorer than the rest of the world. And the reasons for that are often simple things like Muslims are not very good with their money. They can't find halal investments, and if they find them, they're not really sure if they're commercially a good idea. They don't really know how to deal with debts and personal finance related topics. And then the other big thing is that Muslim entrepreneurs, they don't have access to funding, they don't have access to networks, they don't have that support behind them. And so those are the two things that we really focus on with Islamic Finance Guru, which is the personal finance side of things at islamicfinanceguru.com, and then the entrepreneurship support and startup funding at ifg.bc. And the hope is that if we can help Muslims get themselves managing their money better, make it work for them, get themselves onto the housing ladder, then in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, we will have actually made a serious dent in that, that gap between the Muslims and the non-Muslims globally. And that has a whole range of wider repercussions, things like, health outcomes, education outcomes, media underrepresentation, political underrepresentation. All sorts of things are related to the underlying economics. And me and Mohsen are quite sad because we actually enjoy looking at spreadsheets and investment returns and that sort of thing. So we thought, well, why not? Why don't we, help people do this in a proper way? I mean, we've been running Islamic Finance Guru, as you know, as a blog, as a labor of love for many, many years. And it was only, a few months ago, as I said, that we went full time when we realized that, life's too short. And if we really believe in this, then we just have to dive in.
Ibrahim, I mean, I buy into what you're saying, but a lot of Muslims will say, I guess they even would say that maybe focusing on money, getting richer, it's a bit sinful. Are Muslims really supposed to be rich? Isn't it better to be poor and suffer in this life a little bit so we can get the reward in the hereafter?
So I think the simple answer to that is that, wealth is not in of itself haram, and it's not in of itself something that's going to make you sinful. In fact, a wealthy person that gives from charity, for example, is someone that is said to be in the hadith, someone that you should be envious of. One of the few people that you should actually be envious of is a wealthy person who actually does good things. But you're right. I mean, being truly, truly wealthy and letting that go to your head is not right for anyone. So if you're someone, and I wrote an article on this, is it wrong to be rich in Islam quite recently? And in it, I said that for some people, being rich is not right. And everyone knows there comes a point in your, in your life and in your trajectory where you've got to a certain amount of wealth, and that is actually changing who you are. You become like Pip in Great Expectations, the Charles Dickens novel, where you're actually changing the way you behave because of the wealth that you've accumulated. And that's the point where the wealth has affected you too much. But if you're a true Muslim and you have that good relationship with your wealth, where the money is in your pocket but not in your heart, then I sincerely believe that Muslims should actually work really hard to try and accumulate as much assets as possible, not because of the accumulation aspect, but because of the massive value and the massive impact that we can have by focusing that money into various different channels and directions. Because look at Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and others. They don't have their hundreds of billions of pounds just sat in a bank account. Actually, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates have their money, invested across a range of different assets. So wealth just allows you to allocate the assets that already exist in the world.
Ibrahim, can I stop you there for a second? Because I actually lost connection there for about a minute. Did you lose connection with me as well?
I lost connection with you, but I've just been going on and answering.
I think you were still live. As I was somewhere else, I think you were still live.
I think that's right.
And I've lost connection again. This hasn't happened to me so far. I'm just going to get the questions out. If I go away, just keep talking, Ibrahim. Ibrahim, what's going to happen in the next few weeks and months? It looks like we're in for an economic downturn. How hard is this going to affect Muslims?
I think it's going to affect Muslims pretty badly. Muslims, about half of the Muslim community live in the 10% poorest constituencies, and the poorest have been worst hit, both from an unemployment perspective. I think Muslim Census is a new organization that's come out, and they published some statistics, and they mentioned that Muslims have been much worse hit from an unemployment perspective, but also Muslims are from a BME community, right? And from a health outcome, that's been really bad. And all of these things have long-term repercussions, because COVID-19 and the economic effect, I sincerely believe we haven't actually seen the worst of it yet, because everyone has savings. You and I have got savings, and they take time to dwindle down. And it's the same with businesses, it's the same with individuals. And I think by the end of this year and early next year is when we're really going to see, things hitting, the crunch point, where people are going to start foreclosing on houses. People are going to have to get laid off from jobs because the government can't support, as many people as that anymore with the job schemes. So I think it's going to get pretty bad. I guess the natural question thereafter is, well, what do we do about it? And I think the answer to that is probably twofold. One is that if you are lucky enough to be in a job, then you should make sure that you stay in that job, but also think about what would happen if I did end up losing this job? What's my plan B? And really think about that, because if there are things that you can do, like skilling up in online skills like, graphic design, web design, coding, social media marketing, or something along those lines, then you should take those courses and get yourself skilled up right now. And then I think the second thing is to just tighten the belt a little bit and just really think about, what am I doing from a personal finance perspective? Do I have a savings pot that I can rely on for 6 months? Because alhamdulillah, I'm thankful that I did have that, and I can rely on it whenever there's been a change in lifestyle, or a change in our situation. Then we can rely on that, and that's been really helpful. But if you don't have that, then that's really problematic. So I think those would be the two key things that I would say that people really should focus on.
What about things like side incomes, Ibrahim? Can you give the viewers a few ideas about how they can make a bit of money on the side to supplement their incomes?
Yeah, there's actually a YouTube video we did, which is something along the lines of side incomes during the COVID era. And there are so many different kind of side incomes that you can do these days, just sat on your computer. I think a massive one is by learning online skills. So there's a real shortage in the kind of people that we have to hire at Islamic Finance Guru these days, and you probably have to do the same with coders, web designers, graphic design, video editing, all that sort of thing is freely available to learn online. But it takes a time to master that and really get good at it. And there are people who will pay good money for your services if you do that. So that's one easy one. Another one is look at the skill that you already have. Like for me, I was a lawyer. You can always moonlight on the side as long as your contract allows it. You can moonlight easily on the side, and many people do. And if you have any other kind of for example, you might be, I don't know, a dentist or a doctor. You can do locums, or any other profession. There's many professions where you can do a consultancy gig alongside it. So I'd recommend looking into that. And then I would say, finally, you can explore even things that are as simple and straightforward as car boot sales, and buying and selling things from Alibaba, or using fulfilled by Amazon, the FBA Amazon model. Any of those things, if you do them well, can work. But the key thing to really sum all of that up is, it's going to take about 6 months to a year worth of pretty hard work and consistent focus for you to be able to get anywhere. So just stick at whatever you decide on, because it'll probably take a while.
Ibrahim, do you think that, I consider myself, I guess I'm, educated to university standard, like most British Muslims now, but I really feel that I didn't learn anything about money at school. And what we did learn, I feel now that it was a bit of a lie. We were sold a lie. Basically, go to university, work very hard like a slave for somebody else for 40 years, put a bit of money aside, and then when you reach 65, you'll have a pot of money and you can be wealthy in a wheelchair, basically. You can be, if you make it that far and you still have your health, it's wealth in a wheelchair. Is that a complete lie? Is there another way, the entrepreneurial way?
100%, there is the entrepreneurial way. And I'm going to heavily proselytize this in just a second. But before I do, I have to acknowledge that the entrepreneurial route is not for everyone, because it's easy. It's very, very easy to glamorize entrepreneurship and becoming a great businessman, but there is about 20, 30 years worth of extreme hardship that comes before the film that you get to see in Hollywood is actually made. And for most people, they don't necessarily have that appetite for that kind of hardship, and that's not a bad thing. It's just what it is. And for most people, they may not be as, I think, courageous as you might need to be to take that leap, because and that's not, again, it's not a slight on that person. It's just you're prioritizing different things. So like if you have a good 9-to-5 job and you really care about community activities or sports or whatever you do in your extracurricular time, if you start a business up, it's not a 9-to-5 job any longer, and you're going to have to switch your priorities around. So that's the first thing I would say, that it's not for everyone. Having said all of that, I think that it is an absolutely crying shame that of the top 100 companies, public companies in the world, only one of them is from a Muslim country, and that's Aramco, and that's because of oil.
Yeah.
And of the second 100, there's only one more, and that's Sabic, and that's the second biggest oil-related company out of Saudi Arabia. So out of the top 200 companies, we've just got 2 oil companies, and that's it. And we are 25% of the world's population, and that is so problematic from so many perspectives. One, we're not adding value to the world any longer. Where are the Muslim innovators and people who are pioneering and contributing to the world? We need to be doing that. Second, people who become super rich, like if you look at the list of the top 10, 20 richest people in the world, even 100 richest people in the world, almost all of them will either be self-made billionaires, or they will have inherited from their fathers who have been self-made billionaires from entrepreneurship, etc., etc. So entrepreneurship is actually the route to getting really, really rich. And Muslims need to have people who are really, really rich, because that gives them a seat at the table. When we are discussing privacy and how to police the internet and all that sort of thing, it helps to be the founder of Google or Mark Zuckerberg. Muslims are not at that table, and that
Ibrahim, I also think that one advantage of being an entrepreneur, generating your own wealth, is the freedom. Also the freedom to practice your religion and to speak out, because we've seen a lot of Muslim employees in the state sector or even the private sector, when they start speaking out about Palestine, for example, or other controversial issues, through the lens of, the wider community in this country, they get vilified, and they often have to apologize, kind of run away from principles they hold very dearly. But if you're ultimately not beholden to somebody else for your income, you're a lot freer, aren't you? Just say what you think and to behave as you wish.
Definitely. I think you definitely get a lot of freedom as an entrepreneur. And, coming from a corporate background where you're having to burn the midnight oil and you're constantly on edge because someone will drop you an email and say you have to do X thing, you're completely free as an entrepreneur, and you can do what you like. There are 2 caveats to that, though. One is that you still have to motivate yourself, and you probably end up working harder. But the second thing is that, yes, it's true that you have freedom to say what you like, but you still need to, I think, be relatively careful, especially if you're in a business where you are, in the public limelight, or you're courting public attention, because it still takes one misstep, and things could go badly wrong. But ultimately, yes, I think from a political perspective, you're a lot more comfortable actually being able to express your views. So I agree with that.
Okay, I'm out of questions, Ibrahim. Is there anything that you'd like to add? I know that you have to go very soon because you've got another interview lined up. The only thing I would say is that, I wish I would have started my kind of entrepreneurial journey a lot younger instead of leaving it so late. Would you recommend that to, let's say, students that are going off to university now? Start a business?
Yeah, I think I would say that you should definitely start dabbling in entrepreneurship very early as you can. But you should think of your 20s as your setup phase, where, you know, to do a successful business that's going to really be big, you need to have a lot of defensibility around it, i.e. something that is unique and special about it that will build the moat around your business that others can't copy or compete with. And that takes time to develop. And that usually looks like experience, you know, education, or you know, developing some kind of unique talent or network, or, you know, something else. And that takes, you know, a good chunk of time to do. And then when you launch your business at the end of your 20s or even in your 30s, you're much better placed to really build that big business. But you shouldn't do that. You know, you would be much better placed to do that if you had a few smaller things that you've done historically, because they will teach you the bread and butter of what it actually takes. So in a nutshell, yes, I would encourage people to get into entrepreneurship from an early age.
Okay. All right. Jazakallah khair, Ibrahim Khan from Islamic Finance Guru. Some people are saying on the chat that there's some financial relationship between 5 Pillars and IFG, but I can assure you there's none whatsoever. And I didn't get Ibrahim on to plug it, and there's no money exchanging hands whatsoever.
Roshan, I'm happy for there to be a financial relationship. But,
okay. All right. Assalamu alaikum, Ibrahim. Take care, brother.
Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, that was Ibrahim Khan from Islamic Finance Guru. And to be honest, you know, the reason why I got Ibrahim on is because I really feel that as Muslims, you know, we need to be, as a community, not just as individuals, but as a community, we need to be self-financing. We need to be independent. And I think entrepreneurship is a route to that. So I didn't get him on to plug his business. I got him on purely to educate Muslims about, you know, how they can achieve that financial freedom, inshallah. All right, let's get some of some comments up. So this comment says, you're wrong. In substance, Aramco is controlled by Zionists and their puppet. Yeah, so obviously that's Saudi Aramco, Saudi Arabia getting very close to Israel these days. Floating Man says Islamic Finance Guru. Yes, that's the name of another plug. That's the name of Ibrahim's website and organization. So you guys can check it out on your own. I won't do any more plugs. So we have Ahmed chatting with a few other people on the thread. Rashid Ahmed says that most Muslims in the country will deliver this. We just need to look at Saudi, for instance. I'm not sure what that's about. So obviously we have people talking to each other. Abdullah says, oh, this is the guy that I was talking about. Abdullah says, if this guy plugs his business again, please terminate this video. I understand your sentiments, Abdullah. And honestly, that wasn't my intention. Wallahi, that wasn't my intention to plug Ibrahim's business. It was because he's an expert in his area. And that's why I got him on. And I had to ask him who he was, because obviously you guys won't know. And then I got cut off. And then, you know, he was speaking for a bit longer because I got cut off, etc., etc. So we have people telling us that we were live when I thought we'd actually gone off air for a while. Sorry about that, some gremlins in the system. So most people today have been talking about the homeschooling. I guess, you know, ultimately there's loads of Muslim parents that are 5 Pillars readers as well. Zahra says homeschooling gives a broader range of global teaching excellence. Boss J says send them to schools which will teach kids as young as 5 to consider changing genders. I'm not sure about that. I think that's pretty bad advice, to be honest. Rashid Ahmed says, very pertinent issue. I'm pleased to have 5 Pillars and SRE Islamic work together. Inshallah, more Muslim organizations and masjids work together and bring the communities together. What else do we have? A few more comments that perhaps I haven't read out. One long one here from Shireen. I've seen some of the proposed materials that Yusuf was talking about a bit earlier. They're not suitable for primary children. They're sexualization of our children. Muslim parents have got to speak out about this. I would request to see what they're showing children. I realize it's not our place to judge what other people do, but don't tell our children they can be other than what they are born as. Allah gave us our children as what they are. Allah may help us educate our children and guide them to good lives. Ajaz said Jewish community have their own schools and Muslims have some. Our masjids are sat on big balances of money in their bank accounts. And I think it's time masjids started adapting themselves to become schools, community centers, food kitchens that grow much of their own veg. Bad times are ahead. I do agree with you that where We haven't seen the worst of it. I think the furlough scheme has disguised the worst of what we are about to suffer in the next few years. I think house prices are going to crash. You know, I don't know. You know, we've got to really seriously think about how we're going to get through this COVID crisis, because the state isn't going to be there to support us forever. Jahangir Akbar says, Roshan Amsali, it's our country too. Yep, it definitely. We're taxpayers, pay our taxes, help old grannies cross the road, obey the law. We have the right to express our opinion just like anybody else. Okay, let me see if I can get one or two more comments before I start to wrap up. This is really weird from Wakas. I don't know what you're talking about, Wakas. Evil non-Muslims are moving to Morocco. I've got no idea what you're talking, Nizal. Obviously, I don't agree with that sentiment whatsoever. Okay, lots of comments here, but it's mostly people talking with each other. So inshallah, I'm going to wrap up now. So we've been talking about two subjects today. The first about Muslim parents and how they should basically fight for their rights in school, and the COVID and finance issue. So in terms of Muslim parents, what I would say is that we need to fight for our kids' future. It's going to be hard, but quite frankly, being a Muslim is quite hard, isn't it? Jihad, one of the tenets of our faith, is what we're all about. It's about struggle. It's not about having an easy life. This life is going to be a struggle, and especially living in a majority non-Muslim country, we're going to have to fight for our rights. And if we don't do anything, ultimately, we're going to lose our Islam, and our kids are going to, you know, lose their Islam as well. We need to be really vocal about this. We need to challenge teachers. We need to make sure they consult with us. We need to do everything possible to ensure that our kids are not subject to this LGBT indoctrination that is being shoved down the throats of too many of our kids, and we aren't doing enough about it. It's going to be hard, but ultimately, as I said, Islam is hard, jihad is hard, struggle is hard. In terms of the COVID issue, as I said, I think I had a very bad education, just like all other Muslims in this country, about money. Money is something that, you know, concerns us all, and that we have interaction with from the very earliest, you know, when we basically leave our parents' bosoms, you know, and we go out there into the big bad world. It's money, money, money. But how do we make it? How do we deal with it? And I tell you what, if our financial plan is just to stay within public sector institutions or work for somebody else for the rest of our lives, then ultimately we are going to be beholden to our employers. And if these employers are non-Muslims or even Muslims, they may censor our views. You know, we cannot be free to say what we want, to support Palestine, to support every aspect of Islam without fail. And especially if we go on social media and we say the wrong thing, you know, it's going to be amplified by those who don't like us. Pressure will be put on our employers, and, you know, the rest is history. And I tell you what, we will be history in the organizations that we work for. We've seen so many times that Muslims, good Muslims with good intentions, they've had to back down because they've said something against apartheid Israel, because they've supported the struggle of the Palestinians, because they've supported the concept of an Islamic state, because they say homosexuality is a sin. They've lost their jobs because of this, and they have to stay quiet because of this. They have to make humiliating apologies because of this. We shouldn't be in the position where we have to do that. And I tell you what, one way of being able to say what we want and do what we want, of course, within the laws of this country, is being financially independent and having our communities, our masajid, you know, as individuals, our businesses, independent institutions. That is the way forward for our community. We have to be independent. And on that note, I'm going to finish this week's episode of The Big Picture from 5 Pillars. I apologize for the technical gremlins that we had before. I apologize for plugging Ibrahim's business, which I did not mean to do. Some people are not happy with me at that. Please accept my apology. And inshallah, we'll see you next week on The Big Picture. I realize we're moving into Maghrib time there. I made a bit of a mistake. Next week, I think, inshallah, the show will start a bit earlier and finish a bit earlier so that we don't run into Maghrib time. But that's it from me, Roshan Mohammed Salih, Editor-in-Chief of 5 Pillars. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.